Kafka has broken the Star Rail community. All of the Kafka is mid-sayers have begun to shut up, and now a large sum of people have begun doom posting Jing Yuan. You should not feel bad for whatever polls you decide to do in this game. You should drown out all of that negativity around the topic. It literally provides zero value and only serves to put people down and generate salt. So moving on, this video is a build video for Kafka. So that means there's going to be no kit explanation. If you want one of those, I have a video that breaks down her kit in a lot of detail. I'll link that in the description below and you can go ahead and watch that after you finish this one. The information is accurate, and the only thing that I messed up was mentioning that her talent was not a once per turn. It is in fact a once per turn, and we can actually see that on the UI at the bottom of the screen whenever we enter battle. Really, the only thing you need to know about her kit is that she can instantly any DOTs, dots, damage over time, whatever you want to call it, applied onto an enemy using her skill or her ultimate. So summarized down to one sentence, that's pretty much what Kafka does. And it's absolutely glorious. For some reason, damage over time, just watching all of those numbers tick up into a final damage number is so satisfying. The Nihility path in the simulated universe is my go-to path. It's just crazy, crazy fun, and Kafka just amplifies that so much. And so with that said, let's just jump right into the content, what you're looking for, how to build Kafka, starting with her relics. The Band of Sizzling Thunder is undeniably one of her strongest sets. It synergizes perfectly with her kit. It gives a lightning damage bonus and attack bonus whenever a skill is used, 20%. Kafka really wants to use her skill every turn to set off all of the dots on the enemies. The next set you might want to consider is a split set between a Musketeer, the Messenger, or the Thunder set. Basically, a split set can work if your Band of Sizzling Thunder sets have not been cooperating with you. Kinda like with me. I just absolutely cannot roll any speed substats, and speed is very important for Kafka. We'll get into that in a little bit. Musketeer set gives you a 12% attack boost, which boosts our dot damage, but you can also easily replace it with a Thunder set to get a 10% lightning damage boost. And then the two-piece Messenger set will give your Kafka 6 points of speed. If those 6 points of speed allows you to hit certain speed benchmarks or extra actions on certain cycles within the Memory of Chaos, then it will 100% outvalue the attack percent bonus you get from the 4-piece Thunder set. We'll go over speed benchmarks in more detail in a little bit, but that first one you want to hit is definitely 121 or 134. The next set you might want to consider, this is a very niche and kind of out there kind of set to use, but it's the Quantum set. Surprisingly, the Quantum set is pretty generic, the 4-piece set in particular, because it will give you a 20% defense ignoring ability as long as the enemy is weak to Quantum. If you have Silver Wolf, and if she's able to consistently apply Quantum weakness onto the enemy, then any character that has this 4-piece set bonus will get the ability to ignore 20% of the enemy's defense. So just keep that in the back of your mind. The 4-piece Quantum set can actually be quite generic and can be used on quite a lot of characters. Now, in terms of planar ornament sets, Space Sealing Station is going to be your best bet. However, you can use the Pan-Cosmic Commercial Enterprise. Space Sealing Station is just a very easy way to get 24 extra percentage of attack. The only requirement is that you have to have at least 120 speed, and of course, Kafka is going to be very, very speedy, so an easy benchmark to hit. When it comes to the Commercial Enterprise, it increases your effect hit rate by 10% and then increases your attack that's equal to 25% of the current effect hit rate up to 25%. So technically, you get 1% extra attack percentage if you can hit the effect hit rate benchmark. However, Kafka, again, doesn't really need that much effect hit rate, so I wouldn't recommend farming a whole new set for this. Only use it if you happen to have a really good set already. Also, the Space Sealing Station drops from Simulated Universe World 3 and has another planar ornament set that works great for support characters. It increases all allies' attack by an extra 8% as long as the wearer reaches at least 120 speed. So now let's revisit that speed stat for Kafka. I've been hinting at it the whole time I've been talking about relics, but speed is an immaculate stat for Kafka. The more dots she can proc, then obviously the more damage she's gonna output. More actions just means more skill usage, which means more energy, which just means more dots being detonated. However, more actions also means more opportunities for follow-up attacks as well, which helps immensely with her energy generation and also the breaking of enemies. Since her follow-up attack is a once per turn, if she moves multiple times, she's able to do her follow-up attack way more often. If she moves twice within a single cycle of Memory Chaos, then she gets 2 follow-up attacks in that single cycle of Memory of Chaos, and also an extra 20 points of energy regenerated, and also an extra 60 points of weakness break onto the enemy. That amount of weakness break is equivalent to a skill or an ultimate, and weakness breaking the enemy with Kafka just means another application of Shock Dot, and most of us love Kafka, so we're gonna max level her. So that means that our Shock Dots are going to be at its max potential. After playing Kafka for a couple of days now, it actually feels pretty crazy how quickly Kafka can break lightning weak enemies. And I think that as we play her more, we may be able to figure out ways to get her to just ult consistently and just way more often. Here are your speed breakpoints. If you want extra action on cycle 0 of Memory of Chaos, you want 134 speed. If you want the extra action on cycle 1, you want 121. If you want 2 bonus actions on cycle 2, you want 143. If you want 2 bonus actions on cycle 1, you want 161. So those are the 4 speed benchmarks you definitely want to try to hit. 134, 121, 161, or 143. 134 is definitely the most preferred one because it gives you that extra action on the very first turn of the Memory of Chaos. So now let's break down the stats that you want to prioritize with Kafka. Obviously, like I just said, speed, in my opinion, is number 1. Attack is number 2, for a very obvious reason, to boost our dot damage. And then number 3, which may not align with many other content creators actually, is Break Effect. You're gonna want to bring Kafka to lightning weak matchups anyway, and at this point, in my opinion, I think most people have built the correct characters to bring them to the correct type matchups as needed. I feel like I may be actually one of the few content creators advocating for this stat because, well, I've actually got my own thoughts and opinions. Sorry, just kidding. I didn't mean any harm with that. I promise. I just very personally think that Break Effect is a super underrated stat, just like how Elemental Mastery was a underrated stat in Genshin for a very long time. But anyway, those are the 3 highest value stats in my opinion. And then you're probably wondering, wait, what about effect hit rate? And yes, okay, you should build some effect hit rate, but Kafka only needs 10% if you've unlocked every single minor trace of hers that gives her extra effect hit rate, and also her major trace that gives her an extra 30% to her base chance to apply shock. And then if you happen to get her light cone, if you really want to guarantee that 100%, then you're going to need a little bit more. I haven't done the math, but my guess is around 60 to 67%, somewhere around that range. But her talent and her skill hits multiple times, so you may be fine with just a true 80% to 90% anyway. So you have a pretty high chance to inflict the erode status with her skill or her follow-up attack. If I counted correctly, her skill hits 3 times and her follow-up attack definitely hits way more than 5, so lots of chances to apply erode. And now what about crit? Crit Kafka is 100% viable. It does not increase the damage of your dots. However, if you are able to get a reliable crit ratio, then basically the damage loss on your dots goes into that extra damage that you would hit with your crits from your skill, your talent, and your ultimate. I will not say that they are exactly the same. It does end up being just a little bit lower, but only very slightly. We're talking like 10% or less depending on your ratio. So crit Kafka, guys, is totally fine. Don't get gaslighted by the keyboard theory crafters telling you that your build sucks because you decide to build crit Kafka. In my opinion, at the end of the day, if you can clear content, then it doesn't matter how you build your characters. That's what makes Honkai Star Rail great. The variety of build styles you can go with to enjoy the game and still clear content. Now, if we're talking you want to 0 cycle all of the content, then by all means go ahead and seek out that information for the absolute best builds. But crit builds and break builds still 100% work just fine. Now let's go on to Lightcones. I am going to zoom past this section. I'm basically just going to tell you the order of Lightcones that you might want to consider because I have another video that explains all of the details of all of her Lightcone options. So go ahead and watch that video after you finish this one. So her top number 1 Lightcone is obviously her signature Lightcone. A great unconditional damage bonus, and on top of that, a great speed bonus. And then on top of that, an extra application of shock DoT, which she can detonate with her skill skill and ultimate. That speed boost is what puts her signature light cone above all of the rest. It's going to help you hit those speed benchmarks so that she can get an extra turn within certain cycles of the Memory of Chaos. And like I mentioned before, more speed means more follow-up attacks, which means more breaks and more application of shock onto as many enemies as you can. The second one is a good night, sleep well. Depending on what superimposition level you have on this, the damage numbers that this actually produces is going to be higher than the signature light cone. But you don't have speed boost, so that means that you don't get those extra turns, and so that means that the signature light cone ends up pulling ahead because you get an entire extra action, which basically doubles your damage in essence. Up to S4 and S5, the damage numbers will be higher than an S1. Patience is all you need. S2 and S3 are going to produce about the same damage numbers as her signature light cone. The next 3 light cones I've kind of rated all within the same bracket. Fermata at S5, very specifically at S5, Walt's signature light cone in the Name of the World, and then also a new light cone coming to her to shop, presumably in the next update, which is called Solitary Healing. All are very solid light cones. Fermata gives you that extra break effect for stronger shock dots, and Kafka is definitely going to be breaking a lot of lightning weak enemies. And then getting an extra damage bonus against enemies that are either shocked or inflicted with wind shear is incredibly easy to get because, well, obviously Kafka will apply shock. And then also Sampo is one of her most favorite teammates. Welt's light cone just has really high stats. The effect, however, only applies to her skill and pretty much only gives her a damage bonus and an attack percent increase. She will get an unconditional damage buff as long as the enemy is inflicted with some kind of debuff, which again is very easy because DOTs count as debuffs, but the attack percent buff only applies to her skill. It also provides an effect hit rate boost, but it only applies to the skill, and unfortunately, Kafka's skill does not apply shock. So that extra effect hit rate really does nothing, but the high stats kind of make up for it. And then as for the new light cone coming with 1.3, there are more details in that video that I mentioned that you should watch after you finish this one. But basically, it increases break effect, gives her an opportunity to regenerate energy, and also increases her dot damage. All very solid things for Kafka. And then the last rated light cone is Eyes of Prey, because the only thing that this improves is her dot damage. It won't improve the damage of her skill, follow-up attack, or her ultimate, whereas everything else does. Now let's talk Kafka teams. First off, Kafka is an incredibly SP hungry unit. She wants to use her skill every time her turn comes around. If her turn comes around and if you don't have a skill point for her, you're going to be losing out on a ton of damage. So we need a team that is balanced on skill point usage. So her teammates are going to be a dot enabler, a buffer or debuffer, and a sustainer. I personally like buffers more for Kafka, but we'll still mention some of the other debuffers that you can use. So first up is her dot enabler, basically a sub DPS. Sampo, Luca, and Serval are all great dot enablers. Sampo's wind shears are pretty strong, and he also has the ability to increase dot vulnerability, which increases the dots of all of the damage over time effects on the enemy. And then when it comes to Luca, he just has incredibly strong bleed effects. And then Serval, she is able to apply shock pretty consistently with her ultimate and her skill. And so by combining as many dots as we can, Kafka is able to detonate them all and just get lots and lots of damage. And if you don't have any of these 3 characters built up, then you can just use a generic breaker, a character that has a lot of break effect. For example, Su Shang. But you can also just use any breaker that you want that you plan to use as the main breaker for the matchup that you're going into. It becomes even better if that generic breaker is max leveled because break effect and its damage is scaled off of the level of your character. Then also, of course, building break effect on them. Those dots are going to be really, really juicy because break effect dots are in general much stronger than dots that just come from a character's kits. And then you want your buffer or your debuffer. Hela, Silverwolf are great defense shredders, which will increase your dot damage. But other than that, they don't really apply any other benefits besides increasing your dot damage. Whereas when it comes to buffers, they can increase her dot damage, but then also accelerate her turns so that she gets more ults off. These 2 buffers are Tingyun and Asta. Tingyun provides energy regeneration and also some electric damage boost depending on if you are using that special light cone that gives a damage boost for characters that follow the same elemental path. Tingyun also just boosts attack and damage bonus. And then when it comes to Asta, she buffs speed and attack percentage. Attack percentage will increase our dot damage, and then that speed buff is going to allow Kafka to get more turns. More turns means more follow-up attacks, more ultimates, more skills, which means more dot detonations. Just all around, 2 very solid buffers for Kafka. My preferred choice is Asa because that's the unit that I decided to build first. And also because I just couldn't get any speed substats on any of my relics. Leave a comment down below if you can also sympathize with relic farming. And then of course we want our sustainer, either a healer or a shielder. You basically just can't really go wrong with anybody, but for me, I have decided to go with my E1 Locha because he boosts attack with his Abyss Flower Field. I was luckily blessed with an E1 Locha. Now you can decide to get rid of either your buffer or your sustainer if you are absolutely confident in just outputting enough damage to clear a floor. You can replace your buffer with another dot enabler. Just be wary of your skill point economy. Likewise, if you decide to build a crit Kafka, then you can just go with a typical Hypercarry setup. You can basically replace your dot enabler with any kind of sub DPS that balances out your skill point usage. Kafka's skills are also so well designed. The dot proccing effect occurs as the very last thing whenever she uses her skill or ultimate. This means that any dot statuses that you apply with her skill will be procced at the end of that skill on that same turn. For example, if you're using her signature Lightcone, and if you weakness break the enemy, you're going to be able to proc the erode status and the lightning dot from the weakness break, all within a single elemental skill. You do not need to wait until the next turn to proc the erode and the weakness break lightning dot. If you guys are still wondering how exactly Kafka's kit works, then go ahead and watch this video. There are also plenty of other videos linked down in the description down below.